Grace Hamilton wasn't just rich. She believed even the sun rose, because her money said so. The whole town of Willow Creek whispered her name with a mix of fear and admiration. Grace was the kind of woman who didn't walk into a room. She arrived, like royalty descending among peasants. Her silver hair glimmered under the chandelier light of her mansion, her heels clicking on marble floors like a ticking clock announcing power. In her world, everything was either owned, controlled, or beneath her. Grace's empire was built on real estate, skyscrapers, hotels, and land deals that made her one of the richest widows in the state. People said she could buy anything except humility. Her assistant once joked that even God would need an appointment to speak with her. She didn't laugh. She just adjusted her pearl necklace and replied coldly, "I don't waste time with men who think they can negotiate with me." But behind that power was a void, a heart that hadn't felt love in years. Her late husband, Richard Hamilton, had been her partner in empire building, not in affection. Their daughter, Lily, had been raised in boardrooms and business dinners, where affection was replaced with ambition. Grace didn't raise a child. She raised an heir. Or at least, that was the plan until Lily fell in love with a man Grace called a mistake in overalls. Daniel Carter, a mechanic from the lower side of town, the kind of man who fixed engines, not hearts. Grace never met him, but she decided instantly that he was unworthy. When Lily announced their engagement, Grace didn't congratulate her. She simply placed her wineglass down, folded her arms, and said, "If you marry that man, don't ever come back to this house." And true to her word, she didn't attend her daughter's wedding. Not even a gift. Not even a letter. That night, as thunder rolled across the sky, Grace sat alone in her mansion, drinking vintage wine. The news of her daughter's wedding didn't break her. It angered her. She felt betrayed. In her mind, Lily had chosen poverty over class, love over status. "She'll regret it," Grace whispered, looking out her glass window as rain tapped gently against it. But even then, somewhere deep inside that iron heart, a tremor of loneliness echoed, something she refused to admit even to herself. In the weeks that followed, Grace's anger fermented into obsession. She began searching for ways to destroy Daniel's small auto repair business. Using her connections, she made phone calls, whispered in the right ears, and before long, his suppliers pulled out of contracts. The poor mechanic didn't know who was behind it, but Grace did. Each time a deal failed for him, she smiled quietly and said to herself, "Now she'll see what marrying beneath her brings." But fate has a strange way of humbling even the proudest souls. That same evening, Grace's driver called in sick. Impatient and furious, she decided to drive herself home from a property site on the outskirts of town, something she hadn't done in years. The sky had turned gray, rain beating the windshield like shattered glass. She tightened her grip on the steering wheel, muttering, "I built half the city, and yet people still fail me." She didn't notice the massive tree leaning toward the highway, not until lightning struck it. The impact was sudden, brutal. The world spun in metal and screams. Her car crashed against the guardrail, smoke rising from the hood. Her pearls snapped, scattering across the dashboard like broken promises. Then silence. Only the rain tapping against twisted steel. Grace Hamilton, the woman who thought she owned the sky, was trapped under it. And miles away, inside a small, rusty auto repair shop by the same highway, a poor mechanic looked up at the thunder and whispered, "Someone's in trouble out there." That mechanic was Daniel Carter. And fate had just begun to write a story neither of them could have imagined. That night wasn't just another storm. It was the moment pride met kindness, and life turned upside down. Lily had broken the one rule her mother thought could never be broken. She married for love, not money. Lily Carter stood at the small wooden fence of her cozy home, staring at the distant lights of her mother's mansion perched on the hill. The wind tugged at her brown, wavy hair, and the scent of wet pine from the nearby forest filled the air. She had always loved her mother, Grace, but that love had never been enough to sway her mother's judgment. Choosing Daniel had been a rebellion, yes, but also the only choice her heart could make. For weeks after the wedding, letters and calls went unanswered. Gifts remained unopened. Grace's silence was deafening, a cruel reminder that love in her world was measured in money and approval. Lily tried to reason with her mother through phone calls, text messages, even a heartfelt email with photos of their little girl, Emily, playing in the garden. But Grace's pride blocked every attempt at connection. Daniel, meanwhile, had noticed the subtle tension. Every day at his small repair shop, he repaired engines and cars with care, but his mind often drifted to the invisible barrier Grace had built around her daughter. He never judged Lily for her mother's anger. He respected her courage. And yet, late at night, when he returned home tired and soaked from the rain, he would sigh, wondering if one day Grace would soften, or if she would always remain an impenetrable wall of ice. Emily, their bright-eyed daughter, was oblivious to the adult conflicts swirling around her. She laughed in puddles outside their home, her little boots sloshing in the rain, carrying bubbles of innocence that pierced the darkness of the adult world. Lily watched her from the porch, feeling a pang of both joy and guilt. She knew that Grace's anger wasn't just about money. It was about control, about fear of losing a daughter who had dared to defy her. The first confrontation came in the form of a phone call. Grace's sharp, cold voice sliced through the receiver like a knife. "Do you think marrying that man will change who you are, Lily?" she hissed. Lily's hands trembled slightly as she held the phone. "Mom, I'm married for love. I married someone who treats me with respect," she said. Grace's laugh was cruel and hollow. "Respect doesn't put food on a table or pay bills, girl. You'll learn soon enough." Lily hung up the phone, heart heavy but unwavering. She had made her choice. Every day she reminded herself that wealth without love was empty and that Daniel's honesty, humility, and hard work were priceless. Still, the ache of rejection from her mother gnawed at her. Every moment Emily hugged her tightly, she whispered silently, "I hope you understand one day, Mom." Meanwhile, Grace's life continued in stark contrast. She had no idea that fate was preparing a lesson she couldn't buy. She spent days managing real estate deals, attending meetings, and fuming over Daniel's growing reputation in town despite her sabotage attempts. The storm that had passed over Willow Creek seemed to mirror the storm in her heart, raging, uncontrollable, and heading for collision with her own vulnerability. And on that very evening, as Grace prepared to leave for yet another meeting, the winds picked up, trees swayed dangerously, and the first drops of rain hit the blacktop of the highway leading to her mansion. She had no idea that this seemingly ordinary storm would be the night that changed everything, the night where love, pride, and fate would collide. Lily had chosen love, not wealth. But Grace, blinded by pride, didn't see the storm coming. And soon, a twist of fate would force them both to face the truth no amount of money could fix. In a town obsessed with wealth and status, Daniel Carter was invisible, except to those who needed him most. Daniel's auto repair shop sat at the edge of Willow Creek, a humble building with peeling paint, rusted tools, and a creaky sign that read Carter's Garage. Most people in town ignored it. The wealthy drove past without a glance, and even some locals whispered that Daniel should have aimed higher. Yet, inside the cluttered workshop, engines and machines obeyed him like silent disciples. Daniel didn't need wealth. He required respect, and in his world, machines never judged. Every day, he worked from sunrise to sunset. Hands blackened with grease, sweat running down his forehead, yet a calm determination guided him. He repaired engines, brakes, transmissions, but also something invisible, faith in small acts of kindness. Customers might grumble about costs or wait times, but Daniel's patience turned frustration into gratitude. No one in town could buy his sincerity, and for the first time, that honesty would matter more than wealth. He lived simply with Lily and Emily in a small, two-bedroom house a few blocks from the shop. The house wasn't much, but it was filled with laughter, love, and the sound of Emily's constant chatter. It was a home built on humanity, not money. Daniel often thought about the stark contrast between their life and Grace's mansion, wondering how one woman could measure life solely in dollars while another measured it in hearts healed. Yet Daniel knew the world didn't see the beauty of his life. In town, whispers often followed him. That man should have done better, or he's lucky she married him. But Daniel paid no mind. Pride didn't live in his heart, only responsibility. And that responsibility would soon push him into a stormy night where he would become the only person standing between life and death for a woman who had spent decades judging him. The day had been ordinary: a brake pad replacement, a squeaky alternator, a leaking radiator. Yet, even in routine, Daniel's eyes scanned the horizon, noticing the approaching storm. The sky darkened unnaturally fast, clouds rolling in thick and heavy. He tightened the wrench in his hand, feeling a strange pull in his chest, though he dismissed it as intuition. Something or someone was out there in trouble, and he would find them soon. As night fell, Daniel closed the shop and headed toward home, windshield wipers slicing through sheets of rain. On the road, the highway was nearly empty except for the occasional truck. He noticed a distant flash, metal twisting, smoke rising. A car had collided with a fallen tree. Daniel didn't hesitate. He parked, grabbed his first aid kit, and ran toward the chaos. Rain soaked him instantly, but adrenaline burned brighter than the cold. Inside the mangled car, a woman with silver hair and fine clothes was trapped, unconscious, her expensive jewelry glinting in the flickering lights. The airbags had deployed, the windshield cracked like fractured glass. Daniel didn't pause to analyze her identity. He pried open the door, talking softly. "I've got you. You're safe now." His voice carried calm and authority. The only thing that mattered in that moment was saving her life. Hours later, with the storm finally easing, Daniel had carried the woman to a small home. The contrast was stark: marble and silk replaced with modest wooden floors and warm light from a single lamp. She awoke, confused, frightened, and stubborn, unaware that the man she had once despised would now be the only person keeping her alive. Grace's eyes, filled with pride for decades, now blinked at him like a child lost in the dark. The storm had done more than break branches. It had broken the walls around a woman who thought nothing could touch her. And the man she once looked down upon would soon hold her fate in his hands. Grace Hamilton had controlled empires, people, and money, but she could not control the rain or the truth. Grace lay on the small couch in Daniel's humble home, her fingers trembling as they gripped the thin blanket. The storm outside had quieted, but the echoes of thunder still rolled through her mind. The smell of damp wood and oil was suffocating compared to her crisp, scented mansion. She realized, in a rare, shocking way, that wealth could not shelter her from vulnerability. Her pride wrestled with reality. For 70 years, Grace had ruled with an iron hand, believing respect and fear could be bought. But now, dependent on a man she had once called beneath her, her world felt surreal. Every pearl she had worn, every luxury car she had owned, seemed meaningless against the simple act of being rescued. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. Daniel handed her a cup of warm tea, careful not to spill any. "You need to drink something," he said gently. Grace's lips tightened, refusing first out of stubbornness, then surprise at the kindness in his eyes. She realized that despite everything she had believed about him, he was patient, careful, and completely unaffected by her wealth or her reputation. He treated her as a human, not a status symbol. Hours passed. Daniel cleaned her cuts, applied ointments, and made sure she was comfortable. Grace's mind wandered. Flashes of her daughter Lily's wedding, her own family empire, the fights she had provoked, and the lives she had controlled. She remembered her harsh words to Lily, her disapproval of Daniel, and a painful pang of regret began to blossom in her chest. She had never imagined humility could feel so heavy or so revealing. Emily peeked into the living room, her small face bright with curiosity. "Grandma?" she asked, holding a small stuffed toy. Grace's lips parted, unsure how to respond. This little girl, full of innocence and laughter, had unknowingly pierced the armor of her pride. For the first time, Grace felt warmth, a feeling money could never buy. She realized she wanted to be part of this child's life, yet fear and shame made her silent. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. Memories of a lifetime flashed through her mind, victories, insults, and the constant craving for control. She saw the truth. Life was fleeting, people were fragile, and pride could be a cage. Outside, the rain tapped against the roof like a gentle reminder of mortality. For the first time, she feared the inevitable, that she might leave this world having controlled everything but loved nothing. Daniel checked on her again, sitting quietly in a chair. He didn't rush conversation, didn't judge her. He simply offered presence, a lesson Grace had never received. Slowly, her icy composure began to melt, replaced by unease, reflection, and a silent hope that perhaps redemption was possible. She realized that life could not be bought, power could not protect her, and only kindness, true, human kindness, could save her now. For 70 years, Grace Hamilton thought she controlled everything, but the rain on marble, the storm outside, and the hands of a humble mechanic would teach her the truth. Power is meaningless without humility, and life is fleeting when love is absent. No one in Willow Creek could predict that a single storm would change the fate of a wealthy woman and a humble mechanic forever. The sky over North Carolina darkened unnaturally fast that afternoon, clouds rolling in thick as if the heavens themselves were conspiring. Grace, still irritated and stubborn from her day of business dealings, decided to drive herself to inspect a distant property, ignoring the warnings of her chauffeur, who had called in sick. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the rolling hills and slick highways. She fastened her seatbelt and muttered to herself, "I've handled worse storms than this." The rain fell in sheets, battering her windshield. The wipers struggled, unable to keep up with the torrent. Her luxury vehicle, usually a symbol of security, skidded slightly on the slick asphalt. Grace's pride told her she was in control, but nature had other plans. Every turn of the wheel seemed heavier, the road slippery, the trees bending dangerously under the gusts of wind. Halfway through the journey, a large oak tree, weakened by the storm, creaked ominously. Grace didn't notice it at first, too focused on her route, too full of her own certainty. A sudden bolt of lightning struck nearby, startling her, and the tree began to fall across the highway. Panic surged, and she slammed the brakes, but it was too late. The car collided with the massive trunk, the windshield shattering into glittering shards of glass. Metal groaned under the impact, airbags deployed with force, and the car spun slightly before coming to a stop. Grace, dazed and bleeding lightly from a cut on her forehead, tried to open the door, but the vehicle was mangled, twisted against the tree. She pounded on the steering wheel, shouting, "Help! Someone! Anyone!" The storm's roar drowned her voice. Pride and fear collided in a surreal mix as she realized her life was now truly at the mercy of strangers. Miles away, Daniel was closing his garage for the day. He paused as the wind howled, hearing the distant crack of thunder louder than usual. His instincts, honed over years of working with machinery and emergencies, told him something was wrong. He grabbed his flashlight, a first aid kit, and hurried toward the highway. Each step was soaked, each gust of wind a reminder that nature can be cruel and unpredictable. By the time Daniel reached the accident, the scene was chaotic. Branches lay scattered, steam rose from the car's crumpled hood, and rain poured relentlessly. He could barely see Grace through the shattered windshield, but instinct kicked in. "Hold on," he shouted, voice cutting through the storm. With all his strength, he pried open the car door and gently lifted her out, shielding her from the rain as best he could. Grace's eyes fluttered open, confusion and fear mingling with the shock of the accident. "Who?" she whispered. Daniel smiled faintly, steadying her. "I'm just a mechanic. You're safe now." Her pride wrestled with vulnerability. To accept help from the man she had once despised was unbearable. Yet she had no choice. And in that instant, the universe humbled her completely. He carried her to the side of the road, laying her gently on the grass under his raincoat. The storm began to ease slightly as if giving space for life to take priority over chaos. Daniel checked her pulse, wrapped her in his coat, and whispered reassurance. "You're going to be okay. Just hold on." Grace's world had shifted. The empire she built, the pride she nurtured, all faded into insignificance beside the simple, undeniable truth. She had just been saved by a man she had once judged as beneath her. The storm had arrived, and in its wake, pride met its reckoning. Grace Hamilton's life would never be the same, because the hands she once scorned were the hands that saved her. A fallen tree on a stormy North Carolina highway didn't just crush metal, it shattered pride. The mangled luxury car sat under the dim glow of Daniel's flashlight, steam curling from the twisted engine. Grace's breaths were shallow, every inhale sharp with pain. The world around her, once orderly, controlled, predictable, had become chaotic. Twisted metal, rain-soaked asphalt, and snapping branches now defined her reality. For the first time, she realized how fragile life truly was. Daniel kept a steady hand on her shoulder, his rugged, grease-stained frame shielding her from the rain. "I need you to stay calm," he said softly. Grace, drenched and trembling, stared at him in disbelief. His presence was quiet, reassuring, a stark contrast to the world she had always dominated. For 70 years, she had been untouchable. Now she was entirely dependent on someone she had once dismissed. The accident had drawn attention from the few passing cars, but no one dared approach the wreck, except for Daniel. Every step he took toward her was deliberate, every action precise. He lifted her carefully, speaking softly to keep her conscious. Grace, normally imperious and commanding, whispered for the first time in decades, "Who are you?" Daniel replied simply, "I'm just a mechanic. But you're safe now." As he laid her on the roadside grass, Grace's mind raced. Her empire, her control, her legacy, meaningless now in the face of sheer mortality. She shivered, not only from cold and rain but from the crushing realization that life could end in an instant. Her wealth and power, which had always defined her, could not save her here. Only this man, Daniel, could. Her pride clashed with reality. "I don't need help," she whispered, voice trembling but defiant. Daniel shook his head gently. "You do now. Let me help you. Please." The simplicity of his words cut through decades of arrogance. For the first time, Grace realized that her life had value not in her possessions, but in the willingness of another to save her. Minutes stretched into hours as Daniel worked methodically to stabilize her. He used what little equipment he carried, improvising where necessary. Every touch was gentle, every word deliberate. Grace, normally impatient and commanding, felt a strange serenity amidst the chaos. She realized she was no longer in control, and that realization was terrifying and strangely liberating. Finally, the first responders arrived, drawn by the smoke and twisted metal. Sheriff Tom Miller and paramedics worked efficiently, but Daniel had already done the most important thing, kept her alive. Grace's eyes followed the paramedics with a strange mixture of fear, gratitude, and pride wounded like never before. She had underestimated humanity, and now it had saved her. As they loaded her into the ambulance, Grace finally whispered to Daniel, voice barely audible over the storm's remnants, "Thank you for saving me." It was not pride, not obligation, it was humility. Daniel nodded, understanding that this was the first step in a journey that would reshape both their lives. Grace's empire, her control, and even her wealth was powerless here. Only the human heart mattered. On Route 19, under the storm and falling trees, a woman who believed she owned the world learned a harsh truth. Pride could not protect her. Daniel carried Grace carefully into his modest living room, setting her gently on the small couch. The room was simple, wooden floors, a few framed photos, and a small lamp casting a warm, golden glow. Outside, the storm still whispered against the roof, but inside, the chaos of the night had been replaced by a quiet, almost sacred calm. Grace's eyes, wide with shock and disbelief, scanned the unfamiliar surroundings. Wealth could not save her. Only a simple, caring hand, the hand of a mechanic, could. Grace Hamilton, who had commanded empires and people alike, now lay in a stranger's home, helpless, humiliated, and alive only because of his hands. She had always been in control, every boardroom, every business deal, every human interaction meticulously orchestrated. Yet here she was, utterly powerless, relying entirely on a man she had once deemed unworthy. Pride fought against reality, twisting inside her chest like a knot. But Daniel, steady and patient, treated her as a human being, not a queen or a threat. His hands were gentle, confident, and life-saving, and for the first time in decades, she felt powerless. Daniel checked her injuries, cuts, bruises, and minor fractures. He had no medical degree, only knowledge born from years of fixing machinery and dealing with emergencies. Yet he moved with authority, improvising bandages and supporting limbs. Grace, lying under the small blanket, was stunned by the competence and calm in his hands. She had spent her life under doctors, assistants, and CEOs, yet none had offered this combination of skill, patience, and humanity. Time passed slowly. Grace's mind, usually sharp and calculating, now wandered in quiet reflection. She remembered the arguments with Lily, the disdain for Daniel, and the countless moments she had judged others harshly. And now, here she was dependent on the very person she had condemned. Humility, a concept she had avoided all her life, seeped into her consciousness, uncomfortable and yet oddly liberating. Emily peeked around the corner, clutching her stuffed bunny, curiosity sparkling in her wide eyes. "Grandma, are you okay?" she asked timidly. Grace's lips parted, unsure how to respond. She felt a sudden pang of tenderness, realizing that this little girl, innocent and unassuming, had no idea of the power struggles that had dominated her life. For the first time, Grace understood that love and care, not wealth or dominance, held true value. Grace's pride resisted. She wanted to command, to control, to dismiss. But each time she tried, she felt Daniel's quiet patience dissolve her defenses. Every touch, every careful action, every reassurance whispered a truth she had long ignored. Her life's value did not lie in empires, cars, or pearls, but in connection, trust, and humility. That night, Grace finally spoke. Her voice was soft, hesitant, and unlike anything Daniel had ever heard from her. I've never had anyone care like this," she admitted, barely above a whisper. Daniel nodded, acknowledging her vulnerability, without judgment. "Everyone deserves care," he said simply. "Even those who think they don't." Her pride wavered, her mind racing with the implications of her words and the realization that her life could not be measured by wealth alone. For the first time, Grace Hamilton faced a truth she could not buy. Life, care, and trust were priceless. And the hands she had once scorned had just taught her that lesson. Grace Hamilton had spent 70 years commanding the world, but tonight, she was learning that true power is knowing when to let go. The morning after the storm, sunlight pierced through the rain-streaked windows of Daniel's modest home. Grace, still pale and tender from the accident, sat on the small couch, wrapped in a blanket. The silence was unfamiliar, no phone calls, no assistants, no staff bustling at her command. Just the gentle hum of the heater and the occasional drip of water from the roof. For the first time in decades, she faced herself, without the armor of wealth or status. Daniel entered the room with a steaming cup of tea, placing it carefully on the small wooden table. "Drink this," he said calmly. Grace accepted it, her hands trembling slightly. She felt a strange warmth, not from the tea, but from the simplicity of this act. No grandeur, no hierarchy, just care. The realization hit her like a lightning bolt. She had spent her life undervaluing small kindnesses, assuming only wealth mattered. Grace's mind drifted to Lily. Her daughter had defied her, choosing love over status, yet she had endured silently, building a life with Daniel and Emily. Grace's pride recoiled, but the truth was undeniable. She had been cruel, controlling, and unnecessarily harsh. Now, trapped in the vulnerability of her own mortality, she could no longer cling to excuses. Daniel observed her quietly, allowing her space while preparing breakfast in the tiny kitchen. He didn't pry, didn't offer judgment. Grace felt a strange mixture of admiration and discomfort. For the first time, she realized humility was not weakness. It was learning to see the world through someone else's eyes. The mechanic, whom she had once dismissed as insignificant, had just taught her this lesson through patience, action, and human decency. She thought of the countless times she had attempted to control Lily's choices, her education, career, and marriage. Grace felt a pang of guilt so intense it made her chest ache. She had believed her power could shape happiness, but instead, she had driven wedges, fueled resentment, and ignored what truly mattered: love, trust, and family. Daniel approached, sensing her inner struggle, and simply said, "You can start again if you want." The words were simple, yet profound. Grace felt a lump form in her throat. For 70 years, she had believed power was about controlling outcomes. Now, she learned it was about acknowledging mistakes and seeking redemption. Emily bounded into the room, a bright smile on her face, clutching her stuffed bunny. "Grandma, breakfast," she exclaimed. Grace hesitated, then smiled, a genuine, soft expression she hadn't worn in years. The innocence and trust in Emily's eyes reminded her that life's value wasn't in empires or status, but in connection and care. That day, Grace made her first conscious decision. She would reach out to Lily and Daniel, not with commands, not with pride, but with sincerity and humility. The journey to redemption had begun. She was no longer untouchable, no longer invincible, and yet, she had never felt more alive. The hands that saved her had also opened her heart, and she knew she could never ignore their lesson. For Grace Hamilton, the storm was more than rain and lightning. It was a reckoning, a lesson in humility, a call to reconciliation, and a reminder that the hands we dismiss may be the very ones that save us. 70 years of pride can crumble in a single storm, but sometimes that storm gives you a chance to make things right. Grace sat at the small wooden table in Daniel's living room, a pen hovering above a crisp sheet of paper. Her hands trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the weight of the words she was about to write. This note would not be business, not command, not instruction. It would be the first honest words she had spoken to Lily in decades, an apology. Her mind raced through all the moments she had imposed control over Lily, telling her which schools to attend, criticizing her choices, questioning her marriage to Daniel. The pride that had once been her armor now felt like a cage. Grace realized that her wealth had blinded her to what mattered most: her daughter's happiness. Each memory of harsh words and silent judgments pressed heavily on her chest. Finally, she began to write, slowly, carefully, as if each word carried the weight of her lifetime. "Dear Lily," she wrote, "I have been wrong. I have let pride guide me where love should have. I am sorry for the pain I caused you and for doubting your choices. Please forgive me." Her heart ached with the honesty of the words, a rawness she had never allowed herself to feel before. Daniel approached silently, standing beside her without interrupting. "It's a start," he said gently. Grace looked up, surprised by his encouragement. For a lifetime, she had expected criticism, judgment, or lectures. But here, the mechanic who had saved her life offered support without ego, guidance without force. She realized that humility could coexist with strength, and forgiveness could be nurtured gently. Once the note was complete, Grace felt a tremor of courage. She called Lily on the phone, her voice trembling as she introduced herself. "Lily, I need to apologize," she said. Silence hung on the line for a heartbeat. Then Lily's soft, cautious voice answered, "Mom, I've been waiting for you to say that." The words struck Grace like a lifeline, the first connection after decades of distance, and the first sign that healing was possible. Emily, sensing the significance of the moment, climbed onto Grace's lap, wrapping small arms around her. "Grandma, it's okay," she whispered. Grace's eyes filled with tears. She realized that for the first time, love outweighed pride, and that connection, not control, would define the rest of her life. By the end of the day, Grace had taken her first steps toward reconciliation. She had faced her mistakes, acknowledged her failures, and reached out to her daughter. Daniel watched quietly, proud yet unassuming, knowing that the woman who had once seemed untouchable was beginning a journey that would redefine both of their lives. Pride had ruled Grace Hamilton for 70 years. But in the wake of a storm, in the hands of a humble mechanic, she had learned the first lesson of true strength: to apologize, to forgive, and to open her heart. Some doors are harder to open than others, especially the one leading back to a child's heart. Grace sat in Daniel's modest truck, the engine humming softly as rain still pattered on the windshield. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, not to control, but to steady herself. She was about to leave the safety of Daniel's home and enter a world she had long feared, the face of her daughter, Lily, and the life she had once rejected. Every mile felt heavy, as if each one was a test of courage and humility. Her thoughts raced with doubts and fears. What if Lily rejected her? What if the apology wasn't enough? For decades, she had believed her wealth and authority were enough to demand respect. Now, she realized they meant nothing in the face of genuine human emotion. Each raindrop on the windshield seemed like a heartbeat, reminding her, humility, not power, would guide this moment. Daniel rode beside her, silent but supportive. He didn't offer advice or commands, only presence. Grace felt the weight of her pride, still lurking beneath the surface, but Daniel's calm gaze reminded her that strength was not about dominance, but about courage and vulnerability. She drew a deep breath, knowing the moment to face Lily was unavoidable. The house came into view, Lily's small, cozy home, warm lights glowing through the windows. Grace's chest tightened. She remembered every argument, every harsh word, every moment of disapproval she had voiced. Yet, this was her chance to start anew, to cross the threshold of fear, guilt, and pride, and reclaim a relationship she had almost destroyed. As she stepped out of the truck, Emily ran ahead, squealing with delight. "Grandma," she cried, throwing herself into Grace's arms. Grace froze for a moment, overwhelmed by the pure joy and innocence radiating from her granddaughter. No words, no apologies, just love. It hit her like a wave. This was what mattered most. Everything else had been distractions. Lily appeared at the doorway, hesitating, her expression a mixture of caution and hope. Grace's voice trembled as she said, "Lily, I'm so sorry. For everything." The words were simple, raw, and sincere. Lily's eyes softened, and after a pause, she replied, "Mom, thank you for saying that." The tension between them dissolved slightly, the first threads of trust beginning to weave again. Daniel watched quietly, letting the mother-daughter moment unfold. His role was no longer just rescuer. He was witness to Grace's transformation. He felt a quiet satisfaction as he saw Grace's pride give way to humility and her fear replaced by hope. Emily tugged at Grace's hand, leading her inside, and in that small living room, the first steps toward healing began. Grace sat down with Lily at the kitchen table, her hands shaking slightly. She spoke with honesty and humility, acknowledging mistakes, regrets, and the desire to rebuild trust. Lily listened carefully, nodding occasionally, offering small reassurances. The years of tension and conflict were not erased, but for the first time, the foundation for reconciliation had been laid. Crossing the threshold is never easy. Pride resists. Fear whispers. But when you face the ones you've wronged, humility and courage become your greatest allies. Grace Hamilton had taken her first step toward redemption, and the journey had only begun. Apologies are easy. Earning trust that takes courage, patience, and action. The next morning, Grace arrived at Lily's home carrying a basket of freshly baked pastries. She had insisted on making them herself, a small, deliberate act to show care rather than command. Her hands were slightly shaky, but her determination burned brightly. She wanted Lily to see that her words were backed by deeds, no matter how small. Emily squealed with delight, running to hug her grandmother. "You brought breakfast," she exclaimed. Grace smiled, the first genuine, worry-free smile in weeks. She realized that trust was built in moments like this, small gestures that showed love without expectation and care without conditions. Lily watched quietly, arms folded, her eyes softening at the sight of her mother's humility. Grace spoke calmly, "I want to help, not control. Let me be part of your lives in a way that's meaningful, not overbearing." Lily's lips twitched, the first sign of a smile. Slowly, cautiously, the barriers began to crumble. Daniel, quietly observing, noticed Grace's sincere effort. She wasn't just apologizing anymore, she was demonstrating change through action. He felt a quiet pride. For someone so used to controlling the world, these small, deliberate steps were monumental. Every smile, every thoughtful gesture, every effort to listen built trust brick by brick. That afternoon, Grace helped Lily with household chores, folding laundry and washing dishes. She worked quietly, never offering criticism or unsolicited advice. Each task was a small testament to her willingness to serve rather than command, and Lily began to see a mother who was changing, not one who demanded obedience. By evening, the family sat down together for dinner. The atmosphere was tentative but hopeful. Grace shared stories from her past, not to impress, but to connect. She listened more than she spoke, allowing Lily and Emily space to express themselves. For the first time, Grace understood that connection requires patience, humility, and attentive presence. Later that night, Grace sat quietly by the window, reflecting on the day. She realized that rebuilding trust wasn't about grand gestures or wealth. It was about consistency, patience, and genuine care. Each small act of love was a bridge connecting her past mistakes to a hopeful future. Grace Hamilton had learned the hard way that words alone can't heal wounds. Trust is earned, one act of love at a time. And in the small, quiet moments of care, bridges are built, bridges that can last a lifetime. Sometimes the hardest journey isn't across mountains or rivers, it's back through the mistakes we refuse to face. That evening, Grace sat alone in the quiet living room, rain tapping gently against the windows. Her mind wandered through decades of decisions, moments of pride, arrogance, and control that had hurt her daughter and driven wedges between her and those she loved. She realized that apologies and gestures were only part of the journey. To truly heal, she had to face the person she had been and acknowledge the pain she had caused. Daniel entered quietly, holding a cup of warm tea. He didn't offer advice immediately. Instead, he sat beside her, letting the quiet fill the space. Grace finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Daniel, I've been so proud, so arrogant. I didn't see how much I hurt Lily or others." Daniel nodded, a calm presence, and replied, "Acknowledging it is the first step. The next is understanding why it happened and changing from within." Grace's mind replayed countless memories, moments of control disguised as guidance, harsh words spoken in the name of wisdom, and the constant insistence that wealth and power dictated value. Each recollection brought a pang of guilt and regret, but also clarity. She could see exactly how her arrogance had shaped the past and strained her relationships. Daniel listened patiently, letting her speak without interruption. His presence reminded her that true guidance didn't impose, it illuminated. Grace realized that for decades, she had sought control over people instead of understanding them, and that had been her greatest failing. She shivered, not from cold, but from the stark truth. Finally, Grace spoke of Lily directly, voice breaking. "I tried to control her life because I thought I knew better, but I see now. I caused pain instead of love." Daniel placed a reassuring hand on hers. "You're facing it now. That's what matters. And when you act differently, consistently, the past loses its power over your future. Grace felt a spark of hope. The storm had stripped her of pride, but it had also given her a chance at redemption. That night, Grace penned another note, this time to herself. A promise to listen before judging, to act with love before authority, and to rebuild relationships one step at a time. The act of writing crystallized her resolve. The journey ahead would not be easy, but she finally understood that humility, patience, and sincerity were stronger than wealth or pride. Emily crept into the room, curiosity bright in her eyes. "Grandma, are you okay?" Grace smiled softly, ruffling her granddaughter's hair. "I'm learning, sweetie," she said. The small gesture, simple and loving, symbolized a new beginning, one built on empathy, connection, and change. Grace Hamilton had faced her mistakes, her pride, and her past. She understood that true strength wasn't about control, but about humility, action, and the courage to change. And for the first time, the future felt possible. Words can heal, but actions prove the truth of your heart. The next morning, Grace awoke early, determined to show her daughter she was serious. She spent hours preparing a small garden in Lily's backyard, a task she had never done before. Her hands, once accustomed to signing contracts and managing empires, now dug into soil, planting flowers and vegetables with deliberate care. Every seed she planted was a symbol of her willingness to nurture relationships rather than control them. Emily ran through the garden, pointing at the seeds. "Grandma, can I help?" Grace smiled warmly. "Of course, sweetie. Let's do this together." The two of them dug, planted, and watered, laughter mixing with the morning birdsong. Lily watched silently, her heart softening at the sight of her mother's effort and genuine engagement with her family. Later that day, Grace approached Lily and Daniel with a simple offer. She would help manage small errands, cook, or assist with household tasks, anything to prove her sincerity. She did not demand attention or recognition, only a chance to contribute and show change through action. Lily nodded slowly, understanding that this time, Grace's deeds matched her words. The afternoon brought small victories. Grace helped Emily with homework, listened attentively to her stories, and even laughed when Emily's curiosity led to mischief. Each interaction was a bridge, built not with commands or judgment, but with presence, patience, and love. Lily began to see her mother not as a figure of pride and authority, but as a person capable of growth and care. By evening, Grace prepared dinner for the family, a simple meal, cooked from scratch, served with care. She did not attempt to impress with wealth or luxury. She focused on nourishment, connection, and presence. The act was symbolic. She was no longer trying to control, only to participate, to contribute, and to earn trust through tangible actions. After dinner, the family sat together in the living room. Grace shared stories from her past, not to boast, but to explain her mistakes, hopes, and newfound understanding. Daniel observed quietly, seeing the emotional evolution of a woman who had once believed she was untouchable. Lily responded with openness, asking questions and sharing memories, the dialogue building trust and understanding. That night, Grace reflected on the day's events. She realized that rebuilding relationships required consistency, humility, and genuine effort. The garden, the meals, the shared moments, they were small, but powerful reminders that actions speak louder than words. She felt hope stirring in her heart, a realization that the past could not define the future if she was willing to work for it. Apologies are words. Trust is action. Grace Hamilton had finally taken the steps to rebuild what she had once broken. And in the small, quiet moments of care, family bridges were being restored, one deliberate act at a time. Trust isn't given lightly. It's earned, tested, and proven over time. The following morning, Grace awoke with a sense of nervous anticipation. Today, Lily had asked her to help with a particularly tricky task, organizing old family documents and photos stored in the attic. Grace realized this was more than a chore. It was a test of patience, humility, and reliability, a subtle measure of whether her sincerity was genuine. The attic was cramped and dusty, filled with relics of the past, old photo albums, letters, and trinkets that held memories both joyful and painful. Grace carefully handled each item, listening as Lily explained the significance of certain photographs and letters. Her hands moved with care, not haste, a reflection of her newfound respect for the family she had once controlled. Emily wandered into the attic, curiosity bright in her eyes. "Grandma, look. This is when Daddy was little." Grace smiled, kneeling to share the moment with her granddaughter. She laughed genuinely, letting the child lead the conversation. This was no longer about appearances or authority. It was about connection, empathy, and shared experience. Lily watched silently, gauging her mother's sincerity. Grace carefully organized the documents and photos exactly as instructed, following Lily's guidance without complaint or correction. Each small action reinforced Grace's commitment to humility and respect, and Lily's cautious optimism began to grow. Later, a small mishap occurred. Grace accidentally dropped a framed photo, cracking the glass. Emily gasped, and Lily's lips pressed tightly together. Grace froze, heart sinking. But instead of hiding it or blaming circumstances, she immediately apologized and offered to fix the frame, demonstrating accountability and reinforcing her sincerity. By the afternoon, Grace had successfully organized the attic and even discovered forgotten family treasures, which she carefully showed Lily and Emily. Her patience, humility, and attention to detail had begun to earn genuine trust, and the tension that had lingered between mother and daughter started to ease. That evening, Daniel observed quietly from the kitchen doorway. He saw Grace's growth, her willingness to listen, follow guidance, and accept mistakes, and knew she was no longer the woman who had ruled her family with pride and arrogance. Trust was being rebuilt, step by deliberate step. Tests are not punishments, they are opportunities. Grace Hamilton had faced the first real challenge to her sincerity, and with every small action, every moment of patience and accountability, the bridges she was building became stronger, uniting a family once torn by pride. Sometimes, the smallest gestures speak louder than a lifetime of words. The next morning, Grace awoke to the sound of Emily's giggles echoing from the living room. She stepped into the kitchen to find her granddaughter attempting to make pancakes all by herself, flour covering the counter and little hands. Grace laughed, a light, genuine sound she hadn't heard from herself in years. "Need some help, Chef?" she asked. Emily nodded eagerly, her trust and joy a tiny, sparkling reward for Grace's efforts. Lily entered shortly after, watching quietly from the doorway. She didn't interrupt but smiled subtly, noticing how Grace guided Emily without judgment or control. It was a simple scene, flour, laughter, and shared effort, yet it signaled a breakthrough. Lily was beginning to see her mother's sincerity come alive in action. After breakfast, Grace suggested a small walk around the neighborhood. Emily ran ahead, holding Grace's hand and laughing. Lily followed, noticing how gracefully her mother adapted to this new rhythm. No commands, no insistence, just presence and care. It was as if the storm that had brought Grace and Daniel together had also washed away her rigidity, leaving space for genuine connection. During the walk, Grace listened attentively as Emily chattered about school, friends, and the little adventures of childhood. She laughed when appropriate, offered advice only when asked, and allowed the child to lead the conversation. Emily's openness and comfort with her grandmother became the first visible sign that Grace's patience and humility were paying off. Lily finally spoke up, her tone gentle. "Mom, I see that you're really trying. And it matters." Grace felt a lump form in her throat. Validation was not a demand for attention, but recognition of effort, sincerity, and change over time. The words were few, but the weight behind them was monumental. By evening, Grace had helped Lily prepare a small dinner, this time without instructions or criticism, only gentle guidance and shared effort. The evening ended with Emily cuddled between her mother and grandmother on the couch, reading a story aloud. Grace felt warmth spread through her chest. This was the first tangible sign of acceptance and trust she had earned. Later that night, Grace sat quietly by the window, reflecting on the day. The small victories, Emily's laughter, Lily's subtle smiles, shared moments of trust, were proof that her efforts were building bridges. Humility, patience, and sincere action had begun to transform years of pride and estrangement into hope, love, and connection. Acceptance doesn't happen all at once. It begins with small gestures, shared moments, and consistent sincerity. Grace Hamilton had taken the first visible steps, and for the first time, she felt the warmth of being welcomed back into the hearts she had once pushed away. Changing yourself is one battle, but facing the world that shaped your pride is another entirely. The next morning, Grace received a call from her old business associate, a sharp-tongued real estate broker named Marcus. His voice was smug. "Grace, I hear you're spending your time gardening and baking with your family instead of running your empire. What a waste." Grace felt a flicker of irritation but quickly calmed herself. She had learned that reacting with pride would undo her progress. She hung up the phone and took a deep breath, looking at Emily coloring at the table. This was her world now: patience, presence, and family over wealth and control. Marcus's mocking words could no longer provoke the old Grace. She felt a subtle shift. The pride that had once ruled her life now had a new purpose, strength rooted in humility and integrity. Later that afternoon, Lily suggested a small family gathering to invite a few close neighbors and friends. Grace agreed, aware that some old acquaintances would subtly challenge her transformation, testing whether she had truly changed. She wanted to prove, not with words or wealth, but with sincerity, that she was no longer the domineering matriarch she had once been. As the guests arrived, Grace noticed subtle glances and whispers, curiosity mixed with skepticism. Marcus had spread rumors of her softened character, and some old friends doubted her intentions. Grace met each challenge with quiet confidence, listening more than speaking, and engaging with kindness rather than defensiveness. Her calm composure began to shift their perceptions. During the gathering, Marcus arrived unexpectedly, smirking as he approached. "Grace, still playing housewife?" he teased. Grace met his gaze calmly, replying, "I'm learning that life isn't just about business. Sometimes it's about family, humility, and doing the right thing." The statement drew murmurs from the room, proof that her transformation was visible, even to skeptics. By evening, the atmosphere had shifted. Marcus's smirk faded, replaced by tentative respect. Other guests, initially doubtful, began engaging warmly with Grace, noting her sincere interest in family and genuine humility. Grace realized that change was not just internal, it needed to be consistent and visible to withstand scrutiny. After the gathering, Lily approached her mother, smiling softly. "Mom, I think people are beginning to see what I've seen all along. You really have changed." Grace felt a surge of quiet pride, not the old arrogance, but the satisfying warmth of integrity and authentic connection. The world tests those who try to change. Grace Hamilton had faced whispers, skepticism, and old rivals. Yet through patience, humility, and consistent action, she proved that transformation wasn't just a private journey. It was visible, undeniable, and deeply respected. Just when you think life is settled, the storm can return, testing everything you've fought to rebuild. The morning began like any other, but a sudden phone call shattered the calm. Grace's old business partner, Marcus, had been involved in a scandal. A large real estate deal had gone wrong, and rumors were spreading that Grace was somehow complicit. Though innocent, the accusations threatened to drag her back into the world she had tried to leave behind, stirring fear and old pride she thought she had overcome. Lily rushed into the kitchen, alarmed. "Mom, what's happening? Is it true?" Grace shook her head firmly. "No, Lily. It's just rumors. But it's serious enough that I need to handle it carefully." She felt her heart racing, a faint echo of the old Grace, tempted to respond with force and pride. Daniel appeared quietly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Grace, this is just another test. Stay calm, act with integrity, and the truth will shine through." His calm presence reminded her of the lessons she had learned. Humility and patience were her strongest weapons, not anger or pride. Grace decided to face the challenge head-on. She contacted her legal team, clarified her non-involvement, and even took the time to personally reassure close clients that she had acted with integrity. It was exhausting, but for the first time, she faced a high-stakes problem without letting pride dictate her actions. Meanwhile, Lily observed her mother managing the situation calmly. She realized that the Grace before the accident would have lashed out, used money and influence to intimidate, or ignored the problem entirely. Now, Grace faced adversity with grace, a transformation Lily had once thought impossible. By evening, the rumors had begun to die down. Clients and friends recognized Grace's sincerity and integrity, and Marcus's scheming had little effect on her reputation. Sitting at the dinner table with Lily and Emily, Grace felt a quiet relief. She had survived the unexpected challenge without reverting to the old ways, proving her transformation was real. Later, Emily hugged her grandmother tightly. "You're my best grandma ever," she exclaimed. Grace smiled, brushing back Emily's curls. The trust and love she had built were stronger than any rumor or external challenge, a testament to her growth, humility, and commitment to family. Life doesn't wait for transformation, it tests it. Grace Hamilton had faced the storm of rumors and intrigue, and for the first time, she realized that true strength lay in integrity, patience, and humility. The bridges she had built with her family and herself were now unshakable. Sometimes, the heart speaks louder than words, and surprises can heal more than time ever could. It was a calm Saturday morning. Grace woke to find a small envelope resting on the kitchen table. Curious, she picked it up and opened it. Inside was a handwritten note from Lily. "Mom, we've seen your efforts, your patience, and your love. Today, we want to celebrate you." Grace's eyes widened. She hadn't expected such acknowledgement, and the warmth in her chest was immediate. Emily ran in, clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers she had picked herself. "Grandma, these are for you." Grace knelt to accept the flowers, laughing gently. The simplicity of the gesture, full of thought and love, was more powerful than any grand gesture she had ever made in her wealthy past. It reminded her that love and effort mattered far more than status or money. Lily led Grace into the living room, where a small surprise gathering awaited, a homemade family appreciation day, organized by Lily and Emily. There were handmade decorations, a small cake, and a framed photo of Grace with her granddaughter. Every detail was crafted with care, a testament to the love and recognition Grace had earned. Grace felt tears prick her eyes. She realized that the heartwarming surprise was not just about recognition, but a deep, silent acknowledgement that her journey of humility and love had succeeded. Her family had witnessed the changes she had made and embraced her wholeheartedly. Daniel entered the room quietly, observing the moment. He smiled softly, knowing how far Grace had come. She had faced pride, fear, and external pressures, and now she was being celebrated not for wealth, power, or control, but for love, patience, and genuine effort. Grace embraced Lily, holding her tightly. "Thank you for trusting me and believing in my change," she whispered. Lily hugged her back, a silent acknowledgement of renewed trust, love, and mutual understanding. It was a small moment, yet monumental, the first true celebration of her personal transformation. Later, Emily placed a hand on Grace's shoulder. "Grandma, you're my hero," she said. Grace laughed softly, heart full, realizing that true heroism wasn't in wealth or power, but in humility, sincerity, and the courage to change. Recognition doesn't always come through words or wealth. Sometimes, it comes through the smallest gestures of love and care. Grace Hamilton had faced storms, challenges, and her own pride. And now, she was celebrated for the courage it took to truly change. Trust may be earned, but love grows only through time, shared moments, and attention. The next morning, Grace suggested a family outing to a nearby botanical garden. Emily squealed in delight, running ahead to explore the flowers, while Lily followed, smiling softly. Grace walked beside her daughter, pointing out rare plants and sharing stories from her childhood. Every word, every smile, was a step toward creating a new, authentic connection built on mutual respect. Emily stopped at a butterfly exhibit, eyes wide with amazement. "Look, Grandma. They're so colorful." Grace knelt beside her, marveling genuinely. She guided Emily's hands gently, explaining the different species, without lecturing or asserting authority. Her patience and curiosity mirrored a newfound humility, creating trust and admiration in Emily's eyes. Lily observed quietly, noticing how her mother now engaged without dominating, letting Emily take the lead, while still offering guidance. She felt a sense of pride and relief. Grace's transformation wasn't temporary or superficial. It was evident in her interactions, patience, and authentic care. Later, the trio enjoyed a small picnic on the garden lawn. Grace had packed simple sandwiches, fruit, and lemonade, emphasizing thoughtful preparation over extravagance. They sat on a checkered blanket, laughing and sharing stories. Emily's joy was infectious, and Lily began to relax fully, feeling a bridge of connection strengthening between them all. As Emily napped in the stroller, Grace and Lily walked quietly along a garden path. Lily spoke softly. "Mom, I can see how much effort you've made. I'm proud of you." Grace's eyes shimmered with emotion. She realized that rebuilding relationships was a gradual process, nurtured by shared experiences, patience, and genuine care. Returning home, Grace helped Emily paint a small mural on the playroom wall. The project was messy, fun, and completely guided by Emily's creativity. Grace encouraged, laughed, and participated without control, letting the child's imagination lead while she supported lovingly. Lily observed with a soft smile, realizing how much trust and acceptance had blossomed. That evening, as they cleaned up together, Grace felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had learned that love and connection are built through moments of attention, shared joy, and patience, far more powerful than wealth or authority. She looked at Lily and Emily, knowing the bonds were stronger than ever. Trust may be earned through patience, but love blossoms through shared moments. Grace Hamilton had taken each small step to nurture her family, and in these simple, joyful experiences, bonds were strengthened, creating a foundation for a future filled with connection, respect, and genuine love. Sometimes, gratitude is more powerful than any words. It can heal wounds and strengthen bonds in ways we never imagined. That evening, after tidying up the playroom, Lily and Emily disappeared into the kitchen. Grace was curious, raising an eyebrow as they whispered and giggled together. Moments later, Emily ran out, holding a small, hand-decorated card. "Grandma, this is for you," she exclaimed, eyes sparkling with excitement. Grace opened the card carefully. Inside, Lily had written a heartfelt note. "Mom, we've seen your efforts and the love you've shown. Thank you for being here, for being patient, and for choosing family over pride. We love you." Tears filled Grace's eyes. This simple gesture carried more weight than any material reward she had ever received in her life. Emily jumped into Grace's lap, hugging her tightly. "Grandma, you're the best," she squealed. Grace hugged her back, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment and connection that went beyond words. This was the fruit of her patient efforts, a tangible acknowledgement of her love and sincerity. Lily knelt beside her mother and daughter, placing a hand gently on Grace's shoulder. "Mom, we wanted to do something small to show you how much we appreciate you. Not for wealth, not for power, just for being you." Grace felt a lump in her throat. Recognition, sincerity, and gratitude combined into a powerful emotional moment she would never forget. Grace smiled through tears, brushing back Emily's hair. "Thank you, both of you. This means more than you'll ever know." The simplicity of the gesture, a card, a hug, a few words, reminded her that transformation is measured by the love and trust of those who matter most. Daniel watched quietly from the doorway, a soft smile on his face. He knew that Grace's journey had reached another milestone. The acknowledgement from her daughter and granddaughter wasn't just a reward. It was proof that change, patience, and sincerity had truly taken root. Later that night, Grace sat by the window, holding Emily's hand as she slept beside her on the couch. She realized that true legacy isn't wealth or power, but love, patience, and the bonds we nurture with family. Every struggle, every act of humility had led to this moment, a gesture of gratitude that symbolized everything she had worked to rebuild. Gratitude is not just a feeling, it's a reflection of effort, love, and sincerity. Grace Hamilton had faced storms, rebuilt trust, and now, through a simple card and heartfelt words, she experienced the true reward of transformation, love, acceptance, and family.